And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Welcome to Benchley Night. Welcome to Benchley Night. Tonight honors Earl the Pig. Earl the Pig, ladies and gentlemen. I've been driving. I woke up this morning somewhere in Pennsylvania. I was judging a painting event in Cumberland, Maryland. I drove down on Thursday, judged the event on Friday, judged the quick draw yesterday, and then started driving back home. Spent the night somewhere, Hazleton, Pennsylvania, and then got up this morning and drove. And then I got home, fixed dinner, and now we are home. I wanted to get home primarily because I wanted to see if we could raise a little money for Earl the Pig. Many of you, I believe, read today my post about Earl the Pig. For years, John Ross ran the gas station across from my studio. It's a beautiful 1935 era gas station that he never wanted to paint because he was afraid his taxes would go up. But John Ross took care of every animal that no one else cared about. John Ross rescued turtles from the road. John Ross would get outraged when he suspected that someone had deliberately run over a porcupine and a porcupine quill would have punctured the person's tire. He would become very, very angry. He took care, people would drop off snapping turtles. He'd say, I know I'm supposed to kill them, but they have a right to live just like us, and he'd take them to a pond. He rescued a skunk. One time he asked me if I had cats. I guess he saw some cat food in the car, and I said I did. He said, how many have I got? I said, I had 2. I said, how many do you have? He said, I got 27 of them. But he also had a pig. He had a pig named Earl that he had rescued from apparently not very nice circumstances. He got the pig a couple of years ago. And as I told today, one time I was talking with him and he said, yeah, those pigs, they're smart, Charlie. Those pigs are smart. I said, how so? He said, I normally cook that pig pasta and I use the ragu original. I use the ragu original sauce. The other day they were out of ragu original sauce at the grocery store, and so I used some of that Newman's Own. You know, that pig turned his nose up at it. There was a lot to unpack in that sentiment, but it made me really adore John Ross. And John passed away about a month ago, and in talking to his son and his wife, I heard so many other stories about him. I also heard that Earl the Pig has been very, very sad because he heard every day when John would come back from the garage, Earl would hear John's truck and recognize the sound of it and go running out of the side of his pen waiting for John. And before I met with John's wife and son last week, and before I did, I stopped at the grocery store and I bought some pasta and some ragu original in honor of John and of Earl. And as I said this morning, as I was checking out at the grocery store, the woman asked, or jokingly said, well, I wonder what you're going to have for dinner tonight. And I said, actually, no, it's for a pig. And she said, Earl? Is it for Earl? You know Earl? And we talked about Earl. We talked about John Ross, and we both got a little weepy. So I'm happy to say we've raised $520. $520 that's going to go to Earl and Earl's cat friends and whatever else Mrs. Ross feels needs food, care, shelter, because she wants to keep the animals, even though John had said right before he died, you probably can't keep the animals. She's like, I want to keep them. Who else is going to take them? And besides, they remind me of John. So if you feel like, if you haven't tossed us a few dollars yet, in the Facebook announcements today, I'm doing this fundraiser, and it's going through this 501c3 I administer, Rockingham Entertainment Development, and every penny that comes through will go, I promise you. I'll post a picture of the check when I write the check. It'll be going to Mrs. Ross and their animals. And we have a lot of people to thank, because when you're talking about a saint who lives amongst us, who pumps gas for a living and takes care of animals, that strikes a chord with people. Because we all know a bunch of rich assholes who would not give one good goddamn about the least amongst us. And I was proud to know John Ross, and you guys would be proud to be friends of his too. And I am proud of you for contributing. And the unidentified unglet is going to get a workout tonight. You ready? Let's go. First off, my dear friend Martha Rowley, Ms. Terry Hudson ×2, Gary Pierce and Eileen Cortez, Ms. Catherine Fisher ×2, Elizabeth Harlow, my dear college friend Julia Fulton, Daniel Saney, Mike Dunham, who does a fine job taking care of burro rescued donkeys. Mike, you got to get on that the GuideStar thing with Network for Good, so we can have Save Your Ass Donkey Rescue as a beneficiary one of these weeks. Mike Dunham, ladies and gentlemen. Miss Janice Matthews, Mr. Kent Scarborough, the wonderful Jan Sheehy, who did a great job last week at the Ray Masuko Celebration of Life. Thank you, Jan. The Honey Badger. That's not her real name, but that's her Facebook name. My good friend, Honey Badger. Mr. Bill Stevens, part of the glue that holds Bellows Falls together. Miss Andrea Turner. Mr. Neil Nicholson. Did I get... Mr. Rick Gabotsky. Facebook has been really weird today, because it keeps having names show up, but on my phone there'll be one list of names, and on my desktop computer there's another list of names. So if you gave today and your name is not read off, please forgive me. Just send me a note saying so, and I'll read your name next week. I promise you. I believe I said Mr. Neil Nicholson, but if I didn't, I will say it again. Mr. Neil Nicholson. I did Rick Gabotsky. Ms. Debbie Boone. Mr. Bruce Tull, wonderful musician friend. Mr. John T. Wilhelm out there in Omaha, Nebraska. Ms. Bonnie Braun of the Train Tribe. Ms. Jamie Barth of the Train Tribe. Well, many things. Ms. Jamie Barth. Nancy Nelson Kurtz. Gina Gregg. Peggy Papa. Sarah Jane Masuko, who cannot resist an animal in need story. Oh, Unglet didn't like that. Miss Sarah Jane Masuko. My brother, Mr. Will Hunter. And out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, my very tall cousin, Mr. Nat Hunter. his wonderful wife Elise, and their large, fearsome dog Ginger. Thank you all so much. That means a lot. Makes me really happy. So we're gonna have two stories today. We're gonna have two stories, both about animals, both by the great Robert Benchley, both of which I've read before. But what the hey? They're short, as is life, and art is long. Nature's prizes. As some Frenchman has said, translating at sight into English as he went, each one to his taste, but with all the things there are to go out after in the world, I think that Dr. Ditmars is going out after the least attractive. At least they would be to me. Dr. Ditmars is head of the Bronx Zoo, and he is going on an expedition to the Caribbean Sea. And believe it or not, he is hoping and praying that he comes back with the following treasures, and I quote, one Suriname toad, which, according to Dr. Ditmars, looks as if an elephant has stepped on it and has small beady eyes like pinpricks. This is all right, I suppose. This is all right, I suppose, so long as Dr. Ditmars thinks he wants it. One giant horned frog, which attains a length of more than 10 inches. Quote, it is bright green, has long yellow horns, barks like a dog, and can inflict a very severe bite. It is apt to jump at you and bite you with no warning whatsoever, end quote. Not at me, Dr. Ditmars, not at me. He could not jump that far. One tropical spider, or Grammostola longimocana, which is 3 times as large as the common tarantula. In addition to being very active, this spider is also very poisonous, and its bite may have a fatal result. One tree frog of the harlequin family, highly colored, quote, their skin exudes a poison which is used by Indians in northeastern South America to tip their arrows. The venom is said to be as deadly as strychnine if it enters the bloodstream and is fatal within 10 minutes, end quote. Now, Dr. Ditmars' aim is not to keep as far as possible, is not to keep as far away from these pets as possible, but actually to go out and get them. He wants to bring them back to the Bronx Zoo, although so far, no residents of the Bronx have issued statements in the matter. It looks like a good year for house screens in the Bronx. The only one of Dr. Ditmars' quarries which could hold my attention at all is that Suriname toad, the one which, quote, looks as if an elephant had stepped on it. I'd rather like to look at that and then look right away again. The Suriname toad also has quite a cute trick in disposing of its eggs. All this is, of course, according to Dr. Ditmars, it comes like a bolt out of the blue to me. The female lays its eggs in the water, each egg floating by itself. The male then takes them one by one in his flipper and embeds them in the back of the female, where a retaining membrane immediately forms. The young frogs remain in this refuge until they can take care of themselves. More than 200 eggs have been found on the back of a single female. Well, as the Frenchman says, each one to his taste. I couldn't go for that sort of thing myself, but then I couldn't go for any of the other of Dr. Ditmar's hobbies. The second piece we are going to read tonight, ladies and gentlemen. That's all right, Tony Hewlett. Welcome. It's all right that you're late. It does not, we don't mind. We don't stand on ceremony here. The second piece we are going to read tonight is from Bed to Worse, or Comforting Thoughts About the Bison. This is called Good Bison News. A very comforting fact was just called to my attention concerning bison. And I think that every comforting fact ought to be passed on these days. The bison of America are not, as we have always been led to believe, on the verge of extinction. On the contrary, the work for their conservation has been so successful that there are now too many bison. All this has probably been common gossip among bison fanciers for many months, but I've been out in the far west where they don't go in much for this nature business. And it was not until I returned to New York that I learned definitively that all was well with the American buffalo. In fact, the problem now is, what do we do with the extra ones? The last I'd heard about these shaggy beasts was that there were only a few of them left and that they were dying off like flies. Quote, "Isn't it too bad about the bison?" End quote, everybody was saying gloomily. "In 10 years, there won't be any left." Then the war came and people got to thinking about other things. And if you had come up to me last week and asked me if I wanted to see a bison, I should have said, "Don't be silly, there aren't any anymore." But very quietly, for the last 25 years, the American Bison Society has been working tooth and nail to save this noble breed of typical American animal. And they have done so well at their work that last year, 1,400 surplus buffalo had to be killed. It would almost seem that they've overshot their mark a bit. Just how you go about saving buffaloes from extinction, I do not know. But whatever the secret was, the American Bison Society has certainly hit upon it. I suppose that the bison themselves had something to do with it, but they evidently hadn't quite got the knack of the thing before the American Bison Society came along. The president of the society is as much at sea as anyone else. "When we began conserving these animals," he is quoted as saying, "everyone believed they would become extinct within a few years. It was simply a gesture on our part to keep alive as long as possible a memory of the Old West. But the buffalo did not die, as you see, and our problem now has become one of getting enough food and space for them." It may have been just a gesture on the part of the American Bison Society, but it was a gesture that must have packed a punch. Evidently, the bison at least took it seriously. Old West or New West, it is now fixed for bison for years to come. In Canada alone, last year there were 6,300 buffaloes, which was exactly 1,200 too many for the available standing space. Somebody has got to speak to them in private and tell them a joke is a joke. The thing goes more or less in a circle, for the income from the hides and meat of the bison, which have to be killed to make room for the others, is used to provide food for the newcomers and their caretakers. But it's rather a tough fate for a member of a proud breed who thought he was being saved from extinction to find himself being slaughtered to make room for others coming in. You might even ask with perfect justice, what is this? Some kind of gag? It might almost have been more fun to have been a member of a rapidly disappearing species than to be hustled into an abattoir as surplus stock. But the memory of the Old West is in no danger of dying out, as far as bison are concerned, at least. And the American Bison Society has proven what can be done by putting your mind to it. The president says that all other big game are also increasing, with the exception of the mountain sheep. I'm afraid the mountain sheep will be gone in a few years, despite what we can do, he says sadly. Fie! Those are defeatist words. What was done for the bison ought to be able to be done for the mountain sheep. Only this time, it might be well to establish a quota. All right, ladies and gentlemen. All right, thank you so much. Thank you for your support of Earl the pig. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next Sunday for another Benchley night. You take good care out there and keep aware of the least among us, human, animal, vegetable, or mineral. Bye-bye.